Yeah, fine, children. So, of course, you all know that we are focusing on the pre-fertilization event is completely over. So, the first stage in pre-fertilization, in case of animals, it is gametogenesis, and in case of plants, it is sporogenesis. What are the two types of sporogenesis we have seen in case of plants?
Micro and mega, sir.
Yes, microsporogenesis and megasporogenesis, where microsporogenesis represents the male and megasporogenesis represents the female. And in microsporogenesis, we get four microspores by meiotic division. All the four microspores will be functional and they give rise to pollen grains with two celled condition, one vegetative cell and one generative cell. Generative cell undergoes mitotic division and they form two male gamete, and the vegetative cells will undergo mitotic differentiation to form the tube nucleus. This is what we have seen. And the next important thing is we have seen about megasporogenesis, where we saw something about how means the structure of megasporangium, and where we have the megaspore mother cell. The megaspore mother cell undergo meiotic division to form megaspore dyad and megaspore tetrad. Among the megaspore tetrad, three are non-functional. Only one is functional. That functional megaspore develop into a complete mature embryo sac. So we're going to call it as monosporic development. At the same time, when we have to note here that during the formation of a megaspore, means an embryo sac, the functional megaspore, which is haploid, undergo mitotic division, three consecutive mitotic division to form two nucleate and four nucleate and eight nucleate, where no cell wall formation takes place, only karyokinesis or nuclear division alone takes place, and the newly formed nucleus move towards the opposite pole. After 8 nucleate stage, they undergo cell wall formation to form the egg apparatus, which includes two synergid and one egg cell, and one central cell with two polar nuclei and three antipodals are formed. And in the synergids, we have filiform apparatus, which will guide the entry of pollen tube for aiding the fertilization and other events. Till this, we have seen. Any doubt in this, children?
No, sir.
Okay, fine. Now we're going to look about pollination. So, in case of human being, we're going to call this process insemination. That means it is a process whereby which the male gamete is deposited into the female reproductive tract in case of animals. In plants, the gamete transfer mechanism is called as pollination. That means the male gamete has to be transferred into the female part. That means whenever we're taking about the male gamete, the carrier of male gamete is the pollen grains, which has to be transferred from the male flower to the female flower, or from the androecium to the gynoecium, which has to get transferred, children?
Pollen grains.
Pollen grains. So pollen grain is the male gametophyte which will carry the male gametes, and even the tube nucleus also is simultaneously they are transported. That's why the pollen tube and guiding part, all this will be taking place. So it is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a pistil is called as pollination. So in lower class, we have learned about pollination, where we have three important types of pollination, where it's not a basic idea, some in-depth knowledge also we're going to have a look here. Autogamy, self. Geitonogamy, xenogamy, cross. That means autogamy means self-pollination, geitonogamy and xenogamy. Yeah. Now here we have two different plants we have kept here. Here we have two different plants where we can see this is the androecium, this is the gynoecium, androecium and gynoecium. What is autogamy? The transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of same flower, same plant. Same flower, same plant. Geitonogamy, transfer pollen grains from anther to stigma of two different flowers of the same plant. So, what is the difference between autogamy and geitonogamy? In case of autogamy and geitonogamy, the plant condition is same. The plant condition is same. Here, autogamy, same plant. Geitonogamy, same plant. Autogamy, same flower. Geitonogamy, different flower. So, autogamy, same plant, same flower. Geitonogamy, same plant, different flower. So in autogamy, it is like autogamy and geitonogamy, more or less they are similar, where the pollen grains are there for the same plant. Therefore, there cannot be any genetic differences. Whatever was there in the parent body, same thing will be there in the progeny also. So autogamy and geitonogamy cannot bring about genetic variation. But xenogamy, different plant, different flower. That is xenogamy. Definitely, two different genes are combined here from two different plants. Therefore, they bring about genetic variation. So there are some similarity. Autogamy, geitonogamy, same plant, and xenogamy means autogamy means same flower, geitonogamy different flower. Condition is same plant. Xenogamy, two different plant, two different flower. So in geitonogamy and xenogamy, though there are two different flowers, in geitonogamy it is the same plant. There is no genetic variation. In xenogamy, yes, two different plants and two different flowers. Yes, they bring about genetic variation. I'll transform to the next slide, and if you have doubt, you can ask me in that. Now, autogamy, excuse, we came to the meaning autogamy, self-pollination. It is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to stigma of same flower, same plant. But there are some things that I want to expose children. Inflorescence is the arrangement of flowers where we have sepals, the green part, the petals, the colorful part which attracts the insects. Then we have the essential part called as the andrecium and gynoecium. In flowers with exposed anther and stigma, completely autogamy is rare. Because the stigma is exposed, the anther is exposed. By the wind or by insect, the pollen grain can be transferred elsewhere. Autogamy is very much essential. If you want a successful autogamy and it has to be aided in the essential process, there must be synchrony. That means the release of pollen grain at the two-celled or at the three-celled condition and the receptiveness of a stigma, because stigma is the landing platform to receive the pollen grains. So when the pollen grains are released, then the stigma, at the time when the pollen grains are landed, the stigma also must be receptive. I'll take this like this. It is there in your third chapter. Why all insemination will not lead to fertilization? A concept is there. Okay, the sperm is entering into the female reproductive tract, but there is no ovum, means there is no fertilization. So if a sperm is entering into the female reproductive tract, ovum must be there. Then only fertilization can occur. Similarly, if the pollen grains are released, that time stigma must be receptive. If the stigma is not receptive, means definitely autogamy cannot be as successful. Also, anther and stigma should be close to each other. Then only the autogamy can be enhanced. But there are two types of flowers. For example, we have viola, we have oxalis and commalina. Viola, oxalis, and commalina. In this, you can see there are two types of flowers: chasmogamous flower and the cleistogamous flower. What is chasmo and what is cleisto? In case of chasmogamous, chasmo, exposed or open. Chasmo means exposed or open flower where the floral appendages are open. That means the colorful part of a plant, that is the petals, are exposed or they're open. What they're opening up, they're exposed. There, since they are open, anther and gynoecium are exposed towards the air, or they may be exposed towards the water, or may expose towards any biotic agents of transfer. That means the gametes can be transferred here and there, so they can aid in the cross pollination also. But cleistogamous, we can see here, this is a chasmogamous flower. We can see this is a cleistogamous flower. This is also in clistogamous flower. Where it is a flower, they have the stalk and everything, but you can see the floral appendages are closed. In clistogamous, the floral appendages are completely closed. So in chasmogamous flower, the inflorescence or the floral appendages are exposed towards the pollinated, towards the agents of transfer of pollen grains, or they are exposed. In clistogamous flower, the flowers are not exposed. They have closed floral appendages. Therefore, in clistogamous, cross-pollination can never occur. Only self-pollination can occur. So, therefore, clistogamous flower, even in the absence of pollinators, clistogamous flowers, even in the absence of pollinators, they can give you seeds or assured seed sets. Chasmogamous flower, they require pollinating agents. Clistogamous flower, they don't require any pollinating agents because it's a closed floral appendages and anther and stigma are close to each other. And next is there is synchronicity in release of pollen grains and receptiveness of stigma. Three important keywords I've highlighted here. It's a one mark question or rarely a two mark question. Why clistogamous flowers can produce assured seed sets even in the absence of pollinators? That's a question. Clistogamous flowers can produce assured seed sets even in the absence of pollinators because of the following three reasons. What are the three reasons? Number one, they have closed floral appendages. Anther and stigma are close to each other, and there is a synchronicity in the maturation and release of pollen grains and the receptiveness of stigma. Therefore, clistogamous flowers can give you the assured seasons. Now, I'll show you a diagram here. You can see here Chasmogamous and exposed flowers, clistogamous closed floral appendages, and it's about an autogamy. The seeds formed as a result of autogamy is given here in case of the clistogamous flower because always they can produce the assured seed sets even in the absence of pollinators. Any doubt in this, children?
No, sir.
Okay, that's all about autogamy, the self-pollination mechanism. Next is about chasmogamous flower. Just now we discussed that is with exposed floral appendages. Clistogamous flowers, they do not open at all. Anther and stigma lies close to each other. They are autogamy or autogamous. When anther dehisces in the flower buds, pollen grains comes in contact with the stigma for pollination. Clistogamous flower produce assured seed set even in the absence of pollinators. But there is a mechanism that continuous inbreeding or in case a continuous self-pollination results in a problem that is called inbreeding depression. About that, I'll be teaching you in one chapter, strategies for enhancement of food resources. In that, I'll teach you what is inbreeding depression. It's not the right time to introduce what is inbreeding depression, but there is a problem. Remember some depression, some stress is there because of continuous self-pollination. How to overcome this? For this, we have another mechanism called Geitonogamy. Same plant but different flower. But it is a type of self-pollination only. But since it is also an exposed flower, even they can go for cross-pollination also. It is a transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. It is functionally a cross pollination, but genetically it is not a cross pollination. Genetically, it is like a self pollination. So, it is functionally a cross pollination involving pollinating agents, but it is genetically similar to autogamy since the pollen grains comes from the same plant. Now, this is a type of pollination which brings about a genetic variation called xenogamy. Xeno means cross, cross pollination. It is a transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of two different flowers of two different plants. So everything is different here, therefore, they bring about genetic variation. Therefore, it brings about genetically different pollen grains to the stigma. Okay, fine. So we have learned about all this concept. Among them, to bring about pollination, except the Cleistogamous flower, when we take about Chasmogamous flower, and when we go for Geitonogamy, or when we go for Xenogamy, I'm using here some honeybee. The first slide itself, I used a honeybee also. So there is some agents which should bring about pollination. In human beings, children, if they're going for internal fertilization, or we go for internal fertilization in case of human beings. Therefore, we all have an organ called as inseminating organ, and the technical term is the penis, by which the gametes can be transferred. But plants, they don't have all this mechanism. That means there must be someone who can transfer the pollen grains from the anthers to the stigma. For this, we have some agents. These are agents of pollination where we have abiotic. A stands for absent, bio stands for life, so no life. That means and non-living agents of transfer where we have wind and water. Technical term is also there. I'll tell you what is the technical term in the next slide. Biotic agents means the living agents, some living organism which can aid in pollination. Insect, birds, bat, primates, arboreal rodents, reptiles, everything is there. The next slide show you the technical terms that we're going to use for pollination. Self-pollination, cross-pollination we have, where we are talking about cross-pollination or xeno or allo means also different. So abiotic agent is wind, the instrument which is used to measure the wind speed. What is that instrument, children?
Anemometer, sir.
Anemometer. So here we use a term called anemo, means what? Wind. Philly means loving. That means the agents is the wind pollinated flowers. Hydro, water. So wind pollinated, water pollinated flowers. So there are only two non-living agents of pollination or pollinating agents, which are anemophily and hydrophily. And when you look about the biotic agent of transfer, we have two types of biotic agent of transfer. Sorry, we have various types of biotic agent of transfer. Where the common example, bees. Commonly, if it is insects, means people use entomophily. But since we are specifying the organism, even moth is also comes under cat category. So there are specific term given for here. For example, Cantharophily, that is for the beetle, because Cantharology is a branch of science deals with the study of beetles. So Cantharophily for beetle. Next we have a Phalanophily, that is for pollination aided by moth. Next is Melitophily, that is for bees. Next is psychophily, that means for butterfly. Malacology, malaco. So malaco stands for snail. Pollination is aided by snails. Ornithophily, pollination aided by birds. Chiropterophily, pollination aided by bat. That means nighttime nocturnal pollination. And myrmecophily, that means pollination by ants. Now, I want to ask you a question, children. Among wind, water, and biotic agents, who's having the nervous system to perceive the stimulus from the environment?
Biotic agents.
Biotic agents only. So when we take a flower, the flower should be in such a way that it must attract the biotic agents. That means there are some adaptation which is there in the birth in the flower, because we're not talking about the plant. We're talking about a flower because the reproductive part. That means the flower will undergo some modifications. Modifications are a necessary evil or a necessary part to bring about pollination. In case of the organism undergoing living mode of transfer, that is biotic agent of transfer. Now that means we have to go focus on what are the adaptation. Tomorrow we'll be focusing on biotic agents, because there are a lot of technical terms are there which I have to give you a general orientation. But we are going to focus on the abiotic agents about wind and water, because wind and water cannot perceive the, because they don't have a nervous system like us. So the flowers will not have very or attractive and unnecessary things and all will not be there, which actually biotic agents require. The first one is pollination by wind, anemophily. Pollination by wind is called a anemophily. How many of them ever have a habit? Whenever you come to Nilgiris or even in Coimbatore also I have seen. If I see like this, I'll take and blow it up and I have the habit of enjoying it. How many of them have done this? How many of them have done this?
Done this.
Okay. See, I studied in Kendra Vidyalaya Wellington Children, so I used to go by walk 3 to 5 kilometers. I have to go for my schooling. That time, water occur, I'll cross that area that is called military engineering section on area. There, all this will be there as well in a wild variety. We used to take and we used to blow it off and we used to enjoy. But here, when we are blowing, something is carried out, and it should be light. It should not be heavy. So there are some adaptations. Here you can see there are some adaptation. These are nothing but stigma. So pollination by wind is called anemophily. It is a common abiotic agent. Wind pollinated flowers have single ovule in each ovary. Each and every ovary will be having only one ovule. They won't ever have more than one. But there will be numerous flowers in a single inflorescence. Arrangement of flowers in floral buds is called as inflorescence. In a single inflorescence, I'll be having a numerous flower such a way that each and every ovary will be having a single ovule. For example, take corn cob here. These are the tassels of corn cob. It looks like somewhat like an thread which is wired off here and there. What are these actually? The tassels are the stigma and style which wave in the wind to trap the grains. Even wind pollination is quite common in grasses. I will add one more point here. You can see here how is the stigma here. They are generally feathery. So large and feathery stigma to trap the airborne pollen grains. So stigma will be like hairy and it will be sticky only so that they can trap the pollen grains which is carried passively by means of the wind currents. And flower produces large amount of pollen grains compared to the female gametophyte. Pollen grains should be light in weight so they can be carried easily by the wind and it must be non-sticky. That's what I told you. Here I'm blowing it off. It will go very easily. If you have done this, it's okay. Always next time when you come to Nilgiris, just try this. Or in Coimbatore, somewhere here and there, if you find, just try that. Pollen grains are light as well as they are non-sticky so they can be easily carried by the wind currents. If they're sticky, then they'll be attaching in the androecium itself. So they means or in the anther itself. So they cannot be carried. It will be opposite for insect pollination. They often possess well-exposed stamen for easy disposal of pollens into wind currents. And I discussed you about the large and feathery stigma to trap the airborne pollen grains. Next is water. So it is there in your practical about pollination in Vallisneria will be there for you. Sure, short, I'll be keeping this for your board exam practical. This time also I kept it for them because external was very much interested in keeping Vallisneria because it's different and somewhat interesting. That's why we always prefer Vallisneria. Sarina sir, what is interesting in this? Now, first you check this diagram. This is the water body. You can see this is the water surface. Where is female flower? It is there below the surface of water or near the surface of water. This is the
Near
water
it.
level.
Near the sur-
Near the surface of water. But you can see where is male flower, it is below the surface of water. And here you can see pollen grains are released. So I'll tell you the mechanism in the next one. Okay, not now. Pollination by water is called as hydrophily. So pollination by water. It is quite rare. It is limited to about 30 genera, mostly in the monocotyledonid family. We have Vallisneria, Hydralia, which is freshwater, and Zostera, marine seagrasses. So when look in lower plants, water is a regular mode of transport for the male gametes. The question will be there. Why bryophytes are called amphibians of plant kingdom? Anyone?
They can live on land, sir, but they require water mode for transfer of gametes.
Yes. If you look at Talophyta, they require water. Bryophyta, amphibians, they live in land but require the water for a transfer of gametes. Therefore, distribution of some bryophytes, even some botanical snakes like pteridophytes, is limited because they need water for the transport of male gametes to aid in fertilization. Now, what are the adaptation they have here? The same Vallisneria I have given here, children. So what will occur in Vallisneria? You can see the male flower is below, the female flower is above. But here you can see this is the female stalk which is not coiled. Here it is the female stalk which is coiled. In the previous diagram it was not shown clearly. Some coiling is here and only one female flower is shown. That's why I went for another diagram. Here you can check here in Vallisneria. This is the male and it is actually dioecious. Sexes are separate and they are rooted aquatic plants. This is the male flower and you can see here they have ribbon shaped leaves but nothing to do with leaves because it is the vegetative character. We're talking about the reproductive character. Male flower is below the water. Here you can see one stalk is not coiled. Slightly it is coiling here. Here it is not coiled. Here it is completely coiled. So there are three different things I'm going to show you. This is going near the surface of water. This already is the surface of water. Here they have coiled simply completely means that means pollination is successful. I'll tell you how it is. The male flower will release the male flower. That is the means the male inflorescence will release the male flower and the male flower will release the pollen grains on the surface of water. So pollen grains will be passively floating on the surface of water. The female flower will be having a long stalk. The female flower will reach the surface of water, and the pollen grains will release the male gamete. After successful pollination, what will occur means the stalk will become coiled. That means the female flower will be coming down. So that means this is a pollinated flower. This is not pollinated, and this is going towards pollination, and pollination is successful in these two cases. Here, after successful pollination, this is coming down. So in Palestinoria, the female flower reaches the surface of the water by a long stalk, and the male flower or pollen grains are released on the surface of water. They are carried by water currents and reach the female flower. And once the female flower have received the pollen grains, they coil. They coil and they go to the bottom, or they coil and they will be a stalk will become small in size because of coiling, and female will go below the water. In sea grasses, that is Zostera, marine sea grasses, here male flower, female flower, all of them are submerged in water. So male flower remain submerged in water. So pollen grains are long and ribbon shaped and they are carried inside water and reach the stigma. You can ask a question. So its osmosis problem will play a major role. The pollen grain should not get wetted, Nasser. What is the covering they have? The pollen grains of most of the water pollinated species have a covering called mucilaginous covering to protect from wetting. Not all aquatic plants use hydrophily. In most of the aquatic plants, like water hyacinth called terror of Bengal, what is the propagation method of water hyacinth, children? Option A, offset. Option B, stole on.
Offset.
Offset. They propagate by means of offset. So water hyacinth and water lily, the flowers will emerge above the water. You can see in water lily and water hyacinth, though the plants are aquatic, flowers are exposed toward the air. Therefore, here what is the agent we have means we have entomophily, that is insect or wind is the node of agent. So not aquatic, all aquatic plants require water. For example, in water hyacinth and water lily, the flowers are exposed above the water. But in Vallisneria, near the surface of water. See, this is the Vallisneria, right? Near the surface of water, not above the surface of water. And when you look about Zostera, below the surface of water. And here, Vallisneria, male flower below the surface of water. And here, female near the surface of water. After pollination, again they go below the surface of water. But in water acid and water lily, they are present above the surface of water, which one the flower. So they'll go for entomophily and anemophily. So wind and water pollinated flowers are not very colorful, so to attract many insect or other things, and they don't produce any nectar, which is a reward for a successful pollination.